When God gives a last and final warning, it does not arrive with chaos, noise, or panic. It arrives with stillness. This is the part most people misunderstand. They expect fear, thunder, punishment, or sudden destruction. But the deepest warnings are quiet, because by the time a final warning is given, the soul has already been spoken to many times. Silence is not absence. Silence is wait. It is the pause before a door closes, the breath before a choice becomes permanent. A final warning is not anger. It is restraint. It is mercy holding itself back for one last moment. Fear is loud. Mercy is calm. When God warns you finally, it is because love refuses to abandon you without clarity. Love does not scream endlessly. Love communicates truth and then steps aside to let you choose. This is why the warning feels heavy instead of dramatic. It sits inside you. It does not rush you. It waits. It watches. It allows you to see yourself clearly, without excuses, without distractions, without emotional noise. Many people think they have not been warned because nothing external has collapsed yet. They believe warning comes only when life explodes. But the most dangerous misunderstanding is this: destruction is not the warning. Destruction is what comes after warnings are ignored. The warning is the discomfort you feel when you repeat a habit you know is wrong. The warning is the tiredness in your spirit when you chase things that no longer fulfill you. The warning is the quiet knowing that you are wasting strength, time, and potential, yet continuing anyway. God's final warning often feels gentle because it respects your free will. Force would remove choice. Fear would remove growth. But mercy allows you to decide who you will become. This is why the warning does not drag you. It invites you. It says, without words, you already know. Now act. And that knowing is heavier than any punishment because you cannot escape it. You can distract yourself, but you cannot unknow truth once it has been revealed. In disciplined paths like Shaolin training, a master does not constantly shout corrections. In the beginning, guidance is frequent. Instructions are repeated. Corrections are made again and again. But as the student grows, the corrections decrease. Silence increases. This is not abandonment. This is trust. The master is saying, you know the form now. Your body knows. Your mind knows. If you choose to be lazy, that choice belongs to you. God's final warning works the same way. It is given when you already possess enough awareness to change. Mercy does not mean removing consequences. Mercy means delaying them so wisdom still has a chance. A final warning is time being generous one last time. It is life saying, I will not force pain to teach you unless you refuse to learn voluntarily. This is why ignoring mercy is more dangerous than facing hardship. Hardship can break you open. Ignored mercy hardens you. It trains you to live disconnected from truth. There is a deep compassion inside a final warning. It acknowledges your struggles. It understands your confusion. It sees your fear, your attachment, your resistance, and yet it does not lower the standard. Mercy does not say, it's okay to stay weak. Mercy says, I believe you are capable of more, and this is your last chance to prove it to yourself. Most people want endless patience from God, but refuse discipline for themselves. They want infinite chances without internal change. But patience without growth becomes delay, and delay without awareness becomes decay. The final warning is mercy saying, I will not enable your self-destruction any longer. That is not cruelty. That is protection of your higher self. When you feel this warning, it often shows up as clarity rather than emotion. You suddenly see your life as it is, not as you explain it. You see the gap between your potential and your behavior. You see where you compromise, where you choose comfort over integrity, where you trade long-term strength for short-term relief. And this seeing is painful, not because it hurts you, but because it removes your excuses. Mercy exposes truth gently, but firmly. God does not warn because he wants to scare you into obedience. He warns because he respects you enough to be honest. He warns because love does not lie to keep you comfortable. Love tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And the final warning is the most honest moment of all, because it says, after this, I will allow your choices to fully shape your destiny. This is why the warning feels final, not because hope ends, but because responsibility begins. Up until this moment, you could say you didn't know. After this moment, you cannot. Awareness changes everything. Once awareness arrives, neutrality disappears. You are either aligned or resisting. You are either rising or falling. There is no middle ground anymore. In this sense, the final warning is a gift, a rare one. It gives you the dignity of choice before consequences become unavoidable. It gives you the chance to step into discipline before life uses pain as a teacher. Pain teaches too, but pain is expensive. Mercy is economical. It saves you from unnecessary suffering if you are willing to listen. The tragedy is that many people mistake mercy for permission. They think, nothing happened yet, so I'm safe. They confuse patience with approval. But silence after a warning is not agreement. It is space. Space for you to act. Space for you to prove that awareness has matured into action. Space for you to choose strength voluntarily. A final warning is not about God stepping away. It is about God stepping back so you can step forward. Growth cannot be forced. Awakening cannot be dragged out of you. It must be chosen. And mercy honors that process, even if it means allowing you to fall when you refuse to stand. This is why the warning does not beg. It does not argue. It does not negotiate. It simply arrives, clear and calm, and waits. It respects your intelligence. It respects your soul. It assumes you are capable of responsibility. And that assumption is the highest form of respect. If you are feeling this warning now, it means you are not lost. It means you are being trusted. Trusted with awareness. Trusted with choice. Trusted with the power to redirect your life. That is mercy. Not softness, but strength offered quietly. The final warning is love standing at the edge, saying nothing more needs to be explained. The truth has already been spoken. The rest is up to you. Life is not cruel, and it is not random. It is precise. It does not punish you out of anger, and it does not reward you out of favoritism. Life teaches. And when a lesson is not learned, life does not shout louder, it repeats itself. This is the truth most people avoid, because repetition exposes responsibility. If something keeps happening, it is not because the world is against you. It is because you are being asked to grow in a way you are resisting. You may change places, people, jobs, environments, even prayers, but the lesson follows. It wears different faces, but it carries the same message, the same emotional pain, the same frustration, the same ending. And every time it returns, it asks quietly, "Did you understand this time?" Most people answer by blaming circumstances. But life listens only to awareness, not excuses. God's final warning comes when repetition has gone on long enough. When the same patterns have shown up so many times that ignorance is no longer honest. By then, you cannot say you didn't see it coming. You felt it before each fall. You sensed it before each mistake. You knew the outcome before you chose the action. That knowing is the sign that the lesson has already been taught. Now it must be learned. In disciplined traditions like Shaolin training, repetition is sacred. A single movement is practiced thousands of times, not because the body is slow, but because mastery requires deep integration. But there is a difference between conscious repetition and unconscious repetition. Conscious repetition builds skill. Unconscious repetition builds suffering. When you repeat a mistake without reflection, you are not training, you are damaging yourself. Life repeats lessons until awareness replaces habit. Pain is not sent to hurt you. Pain is sent to interrupt you, to stop you from continuing blindly. But if you ignore the interruption, pain has to become stronger to get your attention. This is not cruelty. This is escalation caused by resistance. And the final warning arrives when life is saying, "I will not soften this lesson again." Many people pray for change while repeating the same behaviors. They ask God to remove outcomes without removing causes. They want different results without different discipline. But prayer without action becomes self-deception. Faith without alignment becomes noise. God does not override the laws of growth just because you are tired. Growth demands participation. The repeated lesson is often simple, which is why the ego resists it. It may be about self-control, honesty, discipline, patience, humility, or courage. Not dramatic things, basic things. The basics are hardest because they require daily commitment, not emotional highs. And humans love intensity but avoid consistency. You may notice that the lesson repeats faster now. The time between mistakes is shorter. The consequences feel closer. This is not because life is rushing to punish you. It is because time is no longer interested in negotiating. The more awareness you gain, the faster consequences arrive. This is a sign of growth, not decline. But it also means you can no longer hide behind delay. God's final warning is often this acceleration. Life saying, "We have gone over this enough times." The same relationship patterns, the same financial struggles, the same internal battles, the same promises broken to yourself. At some point, repetition stops being a lesson and becomes a verdict. And mercy wants to stop it before it reaches that point. In Shaolin philosophy, the body learns before the mind accepts. You may intellectually understand the lesson long before you embody it. You may speak wisdom while living contradiction. This inner split is exhausting. And repeated lessons are life's way of forcing alignment between what you know and how you live. The pain comes from misalignment, not from the lesson itself. You cannot outrun a lesson by changing locations. You cannot silence it with distractions. You cannot drown it with pleasure. The lesson waits patiently because it is part of your growth. It belongs to you. And the longer you avoid it, the heavier it becomes because it collects interest. Each repetition adds weight. This is why the final warning feels serious. It is life saying, "I will no longer dilute this message." Not because you are hated, but because you are capable. Repetition ends only when responsibility begins. And responsibility is uncomfortable because it removes victimhood. It removes the story that something outside of you is in control. God does not repeat lessons to humiliate you. He repeats them to strengthen you. But strength is built only when you stop negotiating with truth. When you stop saying, "Later." When you stop saying, "One more time won't matter." Repetition continues as long as compromise exists. There is a moment when you realize the lesson is not external. It is internal. The people are mirrors. The situations are reflections. The world is responding to your level of discipline, awareness, and integrity. This realization is painful because it gives you power. And power means responsibility. The final warning arrives when you are strong enough to carry that responsibility, even if you don't feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. And God does not wait for comfort. He waits for willingness. If you continue to ignore the lesson after the final warning, life will still teach, but the method will change. Gentle repetition becomes firm correction. Firm correction becomes unavoidable consequence. Not as revenge, but as completion. A lesson must end somehow, either through wisdom or through loss. This is why this moment matters. Because you are being asked to learn consciously instead of painfully. To choose discipline instead of damage. To end the cycle voluntarily instead of being forced out of it. Repetition is not a curse. It is an invitation. But invitations expire. And when they do, the door does not disappear. The path simply becomes harder. God's final warning is saying, learn now, while learning is still gentle. If you listen, the repetition ends. If you resist, it intensifies. The choice is quiet, but the outcome is loud. When a final warning arrives, the correct response is not emotion. Emotion rises and falls. Fear fades. Motivation burns fast and disappears. What remains, what actually changes a life, is discipline. Discipline is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not wait for inspiration. Discipline moves even when the mind resists. That is why discipline is the only true response to a final warning. Everything else is temporary. Most people respond to warnings with promises. They say they will change. They feel serious for a moment. They feel guilty. They feel inspired. But feelings are unstable. They cannot carry transformation. God does not ask for feelings. God asks for alignment. And alignment is built through disciplined action, repeated daily, without negotiation. A final warning is the end of emotional excuses. It is the moment where life says, I am not interested in how you feel about this anymore. I am interested in what you do. Discipline is respect in action. It is you saying, through behavior, that you value life, time, and purpose more than comfort. In Shaolin practice, discipline is the foundation of freedom. Without discipline, the body is weak, the mind is chaotic, and the spirit is scattered. With discipline, even simple movements become powerful. The monk does not train when he feels like it. He trains because training is who he is. This is the mindset the final warning demands from you. Discipline is not punishment. It is protection. It protects you from your lower impulses. It protects you from repeating the same mistakes. It protects your future from your present weaknesses. Without discipline, warnings mean nothing. With discipline, even small changes create massive shifts. The final warning means there is no more time for half effort. No more doing things when possible. No more waiting for the right mood. Discipline begins the moment you stop negotiating with yourself. When you say, this is non-negotiable: sleep discipline, food discipline, speech discipline, thought discipline, association discipline. Most people think discipline is restriction. In reality, indiscipline is the real prison. When you cannot control your urges, your attention, your habits, you are owned by them. Discipline gives you ownership back. It restores authority over your own life. That is why God's warning points you toward discipline, not comfort. A disciplined life does not need constant warnings. It self-corrects. When you live with structure, you notice misalignment early. You adjust before damage accumulates. This is wisdom in motion. But when discipline is absent, misalignment grows unnoticed until consequences are unavoidable. The final warning exists because discipline has been delayed too long. Discipline requires immediate action, not gradual intention. You do not slowly stop self-destruction. You stop. You do not slowly begin respect for your body. You decide and act. Delay is another form of refusal, and refusal after awareness leads to consequence. In Shaolin teaching, the body is trained first because the body does not lie. You can deceive your mind with stories, but the body reflects truth instantly. If you are undisciplined, your posture collapses, your breath weakens, your energy scatters. Discipline straightens the spine, steadies the breath, sharpens the presence. This physical alignment influences the mind, and the mind influences the spirit. God's final warning often pushes you towards structure because structure removes excuses. Wake at the same time. Train at the same time. Eat with awareness. Speak with intention. Remove unnecessary stimulation. Simplicity strengthens discipline. Complexity weakens it. Many people say they are overwhelmed, but what they really lack is order. Discipline creates order. Order creates clarity. Clarity creates peace. Peace creates strength. This is the chain that transforms a warning into a breakthrough. Discipline also requires sacrifice. Some pleasures must go. Some people must be distanced. Some habits must die, not because they are evil, but because they are misaligned with who you are becoming. The final warning is permission to let go without guilt. It is life saying, you no longer need this. God does not demand perfection. He demands seriousness. Seriousness is visible in consistency. When you are serious, your actions change immediately, not eventually. Your schedule reflects your values. Your energy is no longer scattered everywhere. Your life becomes quieter, but stronger. The final warning is not asking you to become extreme. It is asking you to become precise. Precision in thought, precision in action, precision in choices. Small disciplined actions done daily will save you from large painful corrections later. Discipline is the bridge between awareness and destiny. Without it, awareness becomes frustration. With it, awareness becomes power. God's final warning is a call to cross that bridge now, while it is still intact. If you respond with discipline, the warning dissolves. It does not need to continue. If you respond with emotion, it fades and returns stronger. Life listens to action. God listens to obedience expressed through effort. This moment is asking you to become reliable to yourself, to do what you say you will do, to live in a way that no longer requires warnings. Discipline is not harsh. Regret is harsh. Discipline is light compared to the weight of repeated failure. The final warning is an opportunity to choose the lighter path. Once discipline begins, fear leaves, confusion clears, strength grows quietly, and the warning, having fulfilled its purpose, turns into guidance. This is the power of discipline. This is why it is the only true response. Most people misunderstand waiting. They think waiting is a pause in life, a useless space between desire and reward. They believe that when nothing seems to happen, life has forgotten them. But this belief comes from an undisciplined mind that measures progress only by visible results. In truth, waiting is not empty time. Waiting is active training. It is the silent forge where strength is shaped without applause. When God makes you wait, it is not because you are being ignored, but because you are being prepared for a weight you could not yet carry. Think deeply about what happened during your waiting period. Nothing looked impressive from the outside. There were no breakthroughs to post, no victories to announce, no clear signs to point at. Yet inside, something uncomfortable was happening. You were being asked to remain steady without certainty. You were being asked to trust without evidence. This is one of the hardest disciplines a human being can develop. Anyone can stay motivated when results are visible. Only the disciplined can remain grounded when progress is invisible. Waiting strips you of illusions. At first, you believe that motivation will carry you. Then motivation fades. You believe encouragement from others will sustain you. Then people disappear. You believe circumstances will improve quickly. Then time stretches longer than expected. Slowly, layer by layer, waiting removes your dependencies. What remains is your raw relationship with yourself. Can you sit with doubt without panicking? Can you continue to act correctly even when rewards are delayed? This is the real training. In the waiting phase, impatience becomes your greatest enemy. The mind starts whispering dangerous thoughts. Maybe you are not chosen. Maybe you wasted time. Maybe others are moving ahead while you are stuck. These thoughts are tests. They are not meant to be believed. They are meant to be observed. A disciplined person does not argue with every thought. They watch it arise, feel its discomfort, and let it pass without action. This restraint builds inner authority. Each time you do not react impulsively, you gain control over yourself. Waiting also teaches humility. When progress slows, the ego has nothing to feed on. There is no praise, no recognition, no proof of importance. This can feel painful because the ego craves validation. But humility is not humiliation. Humility is clarity. It allows you to see where you still lack skill, focus, patience, or consistency. Without waiting, arrogance grows unnoticed. With waiting, arrogance collapses, and what replaces it is quiet confidence. During this period, many people quit. They conclude that waiting means failure. But those who endure understand that deeper laws, timing is intelligence. Just as a seed does not sprout the day it is planted, your growth follows a rhythm that cannot be rushed. If a seed grows too fast, it becomes weak. If fruit ripens too early, it lacks nourishment. Nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished. Waiting aligns you with this law. While you waited, your nervous system was learning to tolerate uncertainty. Your emotions were learning stability. Your mind was learning patience. These are not small skills. These are foundational strengths. A person who has not learned to wait will panic when pressure increases. A person who has not learned to endure silence will seek distraction when focus is required. God does not release responsibility to those who collapse under delay. Waiting also reveals intention. When nothing happens, motivation is tested. Are you doing this because you truly value the path, or only because you expect quick rewards? When the rewards disappear temporarily, only sincerity remains. If you continued even inconsistently, even imperfectly, it means something inside you was real. That sincerity is more valuable than talent. Talent without endurance collapses. Endurance without talent adapts and survives. You may not realize it, but the waiting period refined your desires. At the beginning, you wanted outcomes. Over time, you began wanting stability. You wanted peace. You wanted clarity. You wanted inner strength more than external approval. This shift is crucial. When desires mature, actions become grounded. You stop chasing and start building. You stop reacting and start responding. God's timing is not about convenience. It is about capacity. You were not delayed because the opportunity was not ready. You were delayed because you were not ready. Not ready to handle pressure without ego. Not ready to manage success without losing discipline. Not ready to receive without becoming careless. Waiting builds containment. It strengthens the inner structure so that when expansion comes, you do not break. Every day you waited, you practiced restraint without realizing it. You learned how to wake up and continue despite uncertainty. You learned how to function without guarantees. This is rare strength. Most people need reassurance to move forward. You learned to move forward anyway. This is why the wait is now over. The lesson has been absorbed into your behavior, not just your understanding. The waiting period also trained your perception. You began noticing smaller details. You became aware of patterns in your thoughts, habits, and reactions. You started seeing how easily the mind creates drama when it lacks direction. Awareness grew quietly. Awareness is power. A person who sees clearly cannot be manipulated easily by fear or urgency. Now, when God says the wait is over, it does not mean the struggle ends. It means the foundation is complete. You are no longer fragile in uncertainty. You are no longer dependent on immediate results. You are no longer rushing blindly. You have been trained to stand firmly before moving forward. Understand this clearly, nothing you endured was wasted. Every delayed answer sharpened your patience. Every unanswered prayer strengthened your resilience. Every moment of doubt taught you self-observation. You were not idle. You were being trained at a level deeper than comfort allows. This is why congratulations are deserved. Not because life suddenly favors you, but because you stayed when leaving would have been easier. You endured internal storms without collapsing outwardly. You allowed time to shape you instead of fighting it. Now that the waiting phase has completed its work, you must carry its discipline into action. Do not abandon the calm you developed. Do not rush simply because movement is now possible. Move with the same steadiness you practiced while waiting. That steadiness is your true reward. The wait was not a delay in your life. It was your life preparing itself. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that rewards noise, explanation, and constant expression, silence is mistaken for weakness. People believe that if you are quiet, you are losing. If you are not defending yourself, you are failing. If you are not announcing your struggle, it does not matter. But this belief belongs to an undisciplined society that confuses attention with power. In truth, silence is one of the highest forms of strength, and during your waiting period, silence became your greatest ally. When you were silent, you conserved energy. Every explanation you did not give saved strength. Every argument you refused preserved clarity. While others scattered their power through words, complaints, and emotional reactions, you gathered yours inward. Silence allowed you to stay centered when chaos tried to pull you outward. This is not accidental. This is trained restraint. Silence teaches you to listen. not only to others, but to yourself. When external noise decreases, internal signals become clearer. You begin to hear your real motivations instead of borrowed opinions. You notice which thoughts repeat themselves, which fears demand attention, which desires fade when not fed by validation. This listening is uncomfortable at first. Many people avoid silence because it forces them to confront themselves. You did not avoid it, you stayed. In silence, the ego weakens. The ego thrives on reaction. It wants to be seen, heard, confirmed. When you choose silence, the ego starves. This is why silence feels difficult in the beginning. The mind searches for reasons to speak, to justify, to prove. But each time you remain quiet, you take a small step away from ego-driven behavior and toward disciplined presence. Over time, silence stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like freedom. During your quiet phase, people may have misunderstood you. Some assumed you lacked confidence. Some assumed you had nothing to say. Some assumed you had given up. This misunderstanding is part of the training. If you need to be understood by everyone, you will never be free. Silence teaches you to detach from the need for recognition. You learn to act correctly without witnesses. This is rare integrity. Silence also sharpens perception. When you are not busy talking, you observe more. You notice inconsistencies in words and actions. You see how people reveal their intentions without realizing it. You recognize patterns that loud minds miss. This awareness gives you strategic advantage. A quiet person sees the room before moving. A loud person moves blindly and calls it confidence. Your silence was not passive. It was active containment. You were holding your reactions, your emotions, your plans. Like a blade kept in its sheath, your power was preserved, not wasted. Power that is constantly displayed weakens quickly. Power that is contained grows dense and controlled. This is why disciplined traditions value silence, not to suppress expression, but to refine it. In silence, you learned emotional regulation. Instead of reacting immediately to frustration, disappointment, or doubt, you allowed emotions to rise and fall without acting on them. This skill is essential. A person who cannot regulate emotion cannot be trusted with responsibility. Silence gave you space to practice this regulation daily. You felt things deeply, but you did not let feelings dictate your actions. Silence also protected your vision. When you announce your goals too early, they become vulnerable to outside influence. Opinions distort them. Doubts infect them. Expectations burden them. By staying quiet, you allowed your intentions to mature without interference. What grows in silence develops stronger roots. God saw this, not the silence that comes from fear, but the silence that comes from discipline. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of control. There is a difference. Fearful silence shrinks you. Disciplined silence stabilizes you. You were learning when to speak and when to withhold. This discernment separates the impulsive from the composed. Silence also taught you patience with misunderstanding. You did not rush to correct every false assumption. You did not demand immediate recognition. This tolerance is powerful. It trains you to stay focused on what matters instead of reacting to every distraction. A person who reacts to everything controls nothing. A person who chooses when to respond controls themselves. While you were quiet, your inner dialogue changed. Instead of seeking external reassurance, you learned to reassure yourself through consistency. Instead of asking others for clarity, you practiced clarity through action. Silence forced you to rely on inner alignment rather than external approval. This is maturity. Many people speak to relieve tension. Silence taught you to sit with tension instead, to breathe through discomfort, to remain steady while uncertainty pressed against you. This steadiness becomes your anchor. When pressure increases, you do not collapse into noise. You return to stillness. Silence also refined your words. When you speak less, words gain weight. You stop wasting language on complaints or dramatization. You begin speaking only when necessary, only when truthful, only when constructive. This changes how people receive you. Quiet authority is felt, not announced. God values this restraint, because those who cannot control their tongue cannot control their life. Words create direction. Uncontrolled speech leads to uncontrolled outcomes. Through silence, you learned responsibility over expression. You learned that not every thought deserves a voice. This wisdom protects you. The waiting period gave you many opportunities to break silence, to vent, to justify, to seek sympathy. You chose otherwise, even when it was painful, even when it felt lonely. This choice strengthened your inner posture. You became self-contained. You stopped leaking energy into unnecessary conversations. Now, when the message says congratulations, it acknowledges this invisible discipline. Not the noise you made, but the noise you resisted. Not the explanations you gave, but the strength you preserved. Silence was your power, because it trained you to stand without external support. As the next phase begins, do not abandon silence. Use it wisely, speak with intention, act with calm. Let your presence communicate more than your words. Those who learned silence during waiting move with precision when action is required. Your silence was not emptiness, it was accumulation. When the waiting ends, many people expect relief. They imagine rest, ease, comfort, and reward. But this expectation is another illusion. The end of waiting is not the beginning of relaxation. It is the beginning of responsibility. When God removes delay, it is not to make life lighter, but to make life more precise. Something is now being placed in your hands, and your hands must be steady enough to hold it. During the waiting phase, you were protected by limitation. Opportunities were fewer. Choices were narrower. Pressure was controlled. This was not punishment, it was containment. Now that the wait is over, containment loosens. Space opens. Movement becomes possible. And with movement comes consequence. Every action now matters more than before. Responsibility means there are fewer excuses available. You can no longer blame timing. You can no longer say the conditions are not right. You can no longer hide behind preparation forever. Responsibility begins the moment possibility appears. When the door opens, hesitation becomes a decision. When clarity arrives, inaction becomes a choice. This is why many people fear success more than failure. Failure allows repetition. Success demands consistency. Failure can be explained away. Responsibility cannot. When you are responsible, you are accountable not only for effort, but for outcome. God does not end the waiting for those who still need protection from their own impulses. The wait ends only when restraint has been internalized. Responsibility requires discipline without supervision. No one will be standing behind you reminding you to stay focused. No one will constantly correct your posture. The structure you developed during waiting must now operate independently. If discipline collapses when freedom appears, then the waiting was incomplete. Yours was not. With responsibility comes visibility, not necessarily public attention, but internal visibility. You will see clearly the results of your choices. There will be less confusion about cause and effect. When something works, you will know why. When something fails, you will feel it immediately. This clarity can be uncomfortable, but it is honest. Responsibility removes illusions. Many people believe responsibility is a burden. In reality, it is a privilege given only to those who have demonstrated reliability. You are being trusted. Trust is earned through consistency during unobserved moments. During your waiting phase, you showed up even when nothing responded. That is why trust is now extended to you. Responsibility also demands restraint at a higher level. Before, restraint meant patience. Now, restraint means precision. You must choose carefully what to accept and what to decline. Not every opportunity is aligned. Not every invitation deserves your energy. When waiting ends, distractions multiply. Discernment becomes critical. God ending your wait does not mean rushing is allowed. In fact, the opposite is required. The faster the environment moves, the calmer you must become. Responsibility requires inner stillness under pressure. If you panic when momentum increases, you will waste what was given. Speed without control leads to collapse. There is also a shift in identity. During waiting, you were becoming. Now, you are being relied upon. This does not mean you have completed your growth. It means your growth must now continue while carrying weight. This is the difference between training and performance. Training allows mistakes without consequence. Performance demands presence. Responsibility also exposes intention. When the path opens, motives become clear. Are you moving to serve ego or to serve purpose? Are you seeking validation or alignment? Waiting refined your desires. Responsibility tests them. What you choose now will shape not just your outcome, but your character. When responsibility arrives, guidance becomes subtler. During waiting, signs were obvious, delays were clear. Now, signals are quieter. You must listen more carefully. You must trust the inner compass you developed. This is why silence and patience were trained first. Without them, responsibility would overwhelm you. Responsibility also means carrying others indirectly. Your actions influence more than just yourself. Even if no one sees you, your stability affects the environment you move through. When a disciplined person enters a space, order increases. When an undisciplined person enters, chaos spreads. God does not release responsibility lightly. There will be moments when you miss the simplicity of waiting, when decisions were fewer, when expectations were lower. This nostalgia is natural, but you must not retreat. Growth always feels heavier before it feels natural. Muscles ache before they strengthen. Responsibility feels demanding before it feels integrated. You must also accept that mistakes will now cost more. This is not a threat. It is reality. The higher the responsibility, the smaller the margin for error. This is why awareness must remain sharp. Do not become careless because the door opened. Stay observant, stay humble, stay disciplined. Responsibility does not mean control over everything. It means responsibility for your response to everything. You cannot manage all outcomes, but you can manage your conduct. You cannot predict every challenge, but you can maintain posture under pressure. This is where true mastery shows. God ending the wait is not approval of comfort. It is recognition of readiness. Readiness to act without arrogance. Readiness to receive without attachment. Readiness to move forward without abandoning inner order. Responsibility is the continuation of the training, not its conclusion. Now you are expected to embody what you learned. Patience must become timing. Silence must become clarity. Endurance must become consistency. If these qualities remain theoretical, responsibility will expose the gap. If they are embodied, responsibility will feel demanding but manageable. The waiting phase built your foundation underground. Responsibility builds your structure above ground. Both are necessary. One without the other leads to collapse. You are now being asked to build visibly, using invisible strength. Do not look for reassurance. Responsibility rarely comes with encouragement. It comes with expectation. The expectation is not perfection, but integrity. Not speed, but steadiness. Not noise, but alignment. When the wait ends, life does not become easier. It becomes more honest. And honesty is a form of respect. You are being respected enough to be held accountable. This is why the wait is over. Not because the journey is finished, but because you are now capable of carrying it forward. You believed the waiting was punishment. You believed the delay was rejection. You believed that, because nothing was moving on the outside, nothing was happening on the inside. But this belief was born from impatience, not truth. Waiting was never meant to break you. Waiting was the training ground where your inner posture was adjusted, where your breath learned steadiness, where your mind learned to stop begging for signs and start building strength. Nothing about your waiting was accidental. Every day you woke up and still chose to continue was a repetition in discipline. Every night you went to sleep with unanswered questions was a lesson in surrender. You were not standing still. You were being shaped. The mind wants speed because speed creates the illusion of control. But control is not mastery. Mastery comes when you can remain composed even when life refuses to give you timelines. In the waiting, you were forced to confront yourself without distraction. No applause arrived to validate your effort. No clear milestones appeared to reward your patience. This is where most people leave. They mistake discomfort for failure and silence for abandonment. You did not leave. You stayed. And by staying, you allowed the deeper work to happen. Waiting removes dependency on external motivation. When nothing encourages you, you either collapse or you mature. At first, the waiting felt heavy. You questioned your worth. You replayed past decisions. You wondered if you had missed your moment. This was not weakness. This was the shedding of illusion. Before strength becomes stable, doubt must be exposed. The waiting brought doubt to the surface, so it could no longer secretly control you. You learned to sit with uncertainty without letting it turn into panic. This is not something books teach. This is something life trains. You were trained to stop asking, when will it happen? And start asking, who must I become? Because timing responds to readiness, not desire. Desire is easy, readiness is forged. Readiness requires patience, restraint, and the ability to delay gratification without resentment. The waiting taught you restraint. It taught you how to pause before reacting. It taught you that emotional impulses are not commands. They are signals to breathe, observe, and choose consciously. Each day you resisted the urge to quit, complain, or force outcomes. You strengthened a muscle that cannot be built any other way. The waiting also revealed your relationship with faith. Not faith as belief, but faith as behavior. Faith is not what you say when things go well. Faith is how you act when nothing makes sense. During the waiting, you continued to show up even when you felt invisible. You continued to do the work even when no one acknowledged it. You continued to hold your values even when shortcuts tempted you. This consistency in darkness is rare. Most people are disciplined only when results are visible. You learn discipline without reward. This is advanced training. There were moments when the waiting felt unfair. You watched others move ahead while you remained where you were. Comparison tried to poison your patience. But slowly, you learned something important. Not all progress looks like movement. Some progress looks like stability under pressure. Some progress looks like emotional regulation. Some progress looks like learning how to remain kind without becoming weak. You stopped measuring your life against others and started measuring your response to difficulty. This shift changed everything. The waiting stripped away identities that were too small for what you are meant to carry. It removed attachments to outcomes that would have controlled you later. It exposed motivations that needed purification. If what you wanted had arrived too early, it would have amplified your fear, your ego, or your insecurity. Instead, the waiting allowed those elements to be confronted and refined. You were not delayed because you were unworthy. You were delayed because what is coming requires a stable foundation. Think carefully about this. Things that arrive too early often become burdens instead of blessings. The waiting protected you from receiving what you were not yet prepared to hold. Protection often feels like denial when viewed from impatience. But when viewed from wisdom, it is precision. You were being aligned, not ignored. Each delay was a correction. Each pause was a recalibration. Each closed door redirected you away from paths that would have drained your energy or compromised your integrity. During the waiting, you learned how to stand alone without becoming lonely. You learned how to be quiet without feeling empty. You learned how to trust without guarantees. These lessons are invisible to the outside world, but they form the backbone of inner authority. Authority does not come from titles or recognition. It comes from self-trust earned through endurance. You earned that trust by staying consistent when quitting would have been easier. The waiting also trained your nervous system. You learned how to remain calm when plans collapsed. You learned how to slow your breath when anxiety tried to rush you. You learned how to observe thoughts instead of obeying them. This regulation is power. A person who cannot regulate themselves cannot handle expansion. The waiting taught you how to remain grounded under uncertainty, which means you will remain grounded under success as well. Every time you resisted the urge to force outcomes, you strengthened patience. Every time you accepted what you could not change without bitterness, you strengthened humility. Every time you chose integrity over urgency, you strengthened character. These strengths are cumulative. They do not disappear. They form a structure inside you that will support what is coming next. You were trained to understand that effort does not always produce immediate results, but it always produces internal change. Internal change is the prerequisite for sustainable external change. The waiting taught you to respect process, to trust sequencing, to understand that life unfolds in layers, not leaps. Those who skip layers collapse under pressure. You did not skip. You stayed with the process even when it tested you. Now, when you move forward, you will not be reckless. You will be deliberate. You will not chase validation. You will move with quiet confidence. You will not rush decisions. You will listen deeply before acting. These qualities were not given to you. They were trained into you through waiting. So when you hear the word, congratulations, understand its weight. It is not celebration of arrival. It is acknowledgement of preparation. You are being congratulated not for what you have achieved, but for who you have become. The waiting was not wasted time. It was the most important phase. Without it, you would not have the posture, the patience, or the inner discipline required for what comes next. You are no longer asking life to hurry. You are ready to walk at the pace required. You have learned that strength is quiet, timing is precise, and growth cannot be rushed without consequences. This understanding is rare. And that is why today, the waiting ends, not because time passed, but because you are prepared. There were periods when you spoke into the void and nothing answered back. No reassurance arrived. No sign appeared. No clear direction unfolded. Silence surrounded you, and at first it felt unbearable. The human mind interprets silence as absence, as neglect, as rejection. You wondered if you were being ignored, if your efforts were unseen, if your prayers had fallen into emptiness. But silence was never emptiness. Silence was containment. Silence was protection operating beyond your understanding. Noise creates urgency. Silence creates accuracy. When everything is loud, the mind reacts. When everything is quiet, the soul learns to listen. During those silent seasons, you were not meant to move quickly. You were meant to observe. You were meant to slow your breath, steady your emotions, and learn the difference between impulse and intuition. If answers had come too easily, you would have mistaken excitement for guidance. Silence forced you to develop discernment. Many times, silence saved you from making decisions driven by fear. When the mind is desperate, it grabs the first opportunity, even if it leads to damage. Silence delayed you just enough to prevent you from stepping into situations that would have drained your energy, compromised your values, or trapped you in cycles that were not aligned with your path. What you experienced as frustration was actually restraint applied by a higher intelligence. You were being held back for your own safety. In silence, you learned to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. This is not weakness. This is discipline. Most people numb discomfort with distractions, noise, and constant stimulation. You were stripped of those escapes. You were left with yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your contradictions. Silence brought everything to the surface, and instead of running, you stayed. You faced what rose inside you. This confrontation refined you. Silence trained you to stop seeking permission. When voices disappeared, so did external validation. You could no longer rely on approval to move forward. You had to decide what mattered based on internal alignment, not applause. This independence is critical. Those who depend on noise become controlled by opinion. Those who learn in silence become grounded in principle. You learned how to trust your own judgment without arrogance and without doubt. This balance was built quietly. There were moments when silence made you feel invisible. You questioned your significance. You wondered if your efforts mattered at all. But invisibility is not insignificance. Invisibility is incubation. Seeds grow underground, unseen, protected from disturbance. Silence created an environment where your roots could deepen without interference. Had attention arrived too early, growth would have become performance. Instead, growth became internal. Silence also protected you from false voices. Not every voice that speaks carries wisdom. Not every opportunity that presents itself carries truth. In loud seasons, you might have followed enthusiasm instead of clarity. Silence removed the distractions so you could recognize what was essential. It taught you to notice subtle signals instead of dramatic signs. This sensitivity is a form of intelligence that cannot be taught through instruction. It is learned through quiet endurance. When nothing external guided you, you were forced to refine your internal compass. You learned to ask better questions. Not, what do they want from me? But, what aligns with my values? Not, how fast can I move? But, what direction is correct? Silence shifted your focus from speed to accuracy. Accuracy prevents regret. Silence saved you from many regrets you will never even know about. Silence also revealed who truly belonged in your life. When nothing was happening, when there was no excitement to share, when there was no benefit to staying close, some people faded away. This was not loss. This was clarity. Silence removes conditional connections. It leaves behind only what is real. You learned who respected your stillness and who only valued your momentum. This knowledge will guide your relationships moving forward. In silence, your ego weakened and your awareness strengthened. Without recognition, you could no longer perform. Without affirmation, you could no longer pretend. You were forced to be honest with yourself. Honest about your limitations. Honest about your desires. Honest about your fears. This honesty stabilized you. Stability is required for responsibility. Silence prepared you to carry weight without collapsing under it. There were times when silence tested your patience more than any obstacle ever could. Obstacles give something to fight against. Silence gives nothing, and yet you endured. You learned how to continue without feedback. You learned how to trust process without evidence. This kind of faith is rare. It is not blind faith, it is disciplined faith. Faith rooted in behavior, not emotion. Silence also slowed your reactions. You stopped responding impulsively. You started observing before speaking. You learned the power of restraint. Restraint is not suppression. It is conscious control. A restrained mind does not rush into conflict. A restrained heart does not attach too quickly. A restrained spirit waits for alignment. Silence cultivated this restraint in you. During the quiet, you learned how to sit alone without feeling empty. Solitude became a teacher instead of a threat. You discovered that peace does not require constant stimulation. It requires presence. You learned how to be with yourself fully, without judgment, without escape. This self-relationship will become your anchor in future chaos. Those who cannot sit with themselves cannot handle expansion. Silence also recalibrated your priorities. When everything slowed down, what truly mattered became clear. Superficial desires lost their grip. You stopped chasing what looked impressive and started valuing what felt stable. This shift is maturity. Maturity is not losing ambition, it is refining it. Silence refined your ambition so it could serve you instead of control you. You may not realize how much danger silence protected you from. Some paths look attractive but end in exhaustion. Some doors appear open but lead to compromise. Silence prevented premature movement. It allowed time for truth to surface. Time exposes intentions. Silence gave time its space to work in your favor. Now, you no longer fear quiet moments. You respect them. You understand that silence is not emptiness, but instruction without words. You listen more deeply. You speak more intentionally. You move with awareness. These qualities were forged when no one was watching and nothing was happening. When the noise returns, and it will, you will not be overwhelmed. You have been trained in quiet. You know how to retreat inward when external pressure increases. You know how to pause before reacting. You know how to hear your inner voice, even when the world becomes loud again. Silence was not punishment. Silence was preparation. It was the shield that protected your timing, your integrity, and your clarity. You were not ignored. You were guarded. And because of this protection, you will now move forward with precision instead of haste, with depth instead of surface strength, and with calm authority instead of fragile confidence. The silence is ending not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Strength is often misunderstood. Many believe strength means becoming hard, unfeeling, and distant. They think surviving pain requires building walls so thick that nothing can reach the heart. But that is not strength. That is armor worn out of fear. True strength is the ability to remain open without being fragile, to remain kind without being controllable, to remain soft without being broken. What you learned through your journey is rare. You learned how to endure without losing your humanity. Pain came to you repeatedly. Disappointment tested your expectations. Loss challenged your attachments. Betrayal questioned your trust. Each experience offered you a choice. You could become bitter, or you could become aware. Bitterness is easy. It gives quick relief. It allows you to blame, to close off, to justify emotional withdrawal. But bitterness is heavy. It poisons the mind and hardens the heart. You chose the slower, more difficult path. You chose wisdom. Wisdom does not arrive suddenly. It forms gradually through observation. When pain entered your life, you did not immediately understand it. At first, it hurt deeply. You questioned fairness. You questioned timing. You questioned yourself. But instead of letting pain define your identity, you allowed it to inform your understanding. You watched your reactions. You noticed where anger rose, where fear appeared, where attachment tightened. This awareness was the beginning of strength. You learned that emotions are not enemies. They are signals. Anger pointed to boundaries that had been crossed. Sadness pointed to things that mattered deeply to you. Fear pointed to areas where trust needed reinforcement. Instead of suppressing these emotions or letting them control you, you learned to listen without obeying. This is emotional intelligence. This is strength with control. There were moments when you could have closed your heart completely. When trust was broken, it would have been easy to say, "Never again." When efforts went unnoticed, it would have been easy to say, "Why bother?" When kindness was taken for granted, it would have been easy to withdraw, but you didn't. You adjusted, but you did not shut down. You became selective without becoming cold. This balance is difficult to achieve. It requires courage. Hardness comes from fear of being hurt again. Wisdom comes from understanding how to protect yourself without abandoning compassion. You learned the difference. You learned how to say no without guilt. You learned how to step back without resentment. You learned how to walk away without hatred. These are signs of inner maturity. They show that you are no longer reactive. You are responsive. Your strength became quiet. You no longer needed to prove anything. You no longer reacted to provocation. You no longer chased validation. This did not make you weak. It made you stable. Stability is power that does not need to announce itself. Those who are truly strong do not intimidate. They ground. They bring calm into chaos. You became this presence. Pain also taught you humility. You realized that everyone is carrying something unseen. This understanding softened your judgment. You stopped assuming malice where there was confusion. You stopped taking everything personally. This perspective freed you. When you stopped interpreting every action as an attack, you conserved energy. You chose peace over unnecessary conflict. This choice strengthened you. You also learned to forgive without forgetting. Forgiveness did not mean allowing harm to continue. It meant releasing yourself from the weight of resentment. You understood that holding on to anger gives power to what hurt you. Letting go returned that power to you. This is not emotional bypassing. It is emotional mastery. You chose freedom over attachment to pain. Your compassion deepened, but it became grounded. You no longer tried to save everyone. You no longer carried responsibilities that were not yours. You learned that helping does not mean self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. You learned to offer support without abandoning yourself. This self-respect is strength. You also became honest with yourself. You acknowledged your limitations. You accepted that you could not control outcomes, only effort and intention. This acceptance did not weaken your ambition, it refined it. You stopped fighting reality and started working with it. This alignment reduced suffering and increased effectiveness. There were times when staying kind felt risky, when remaining open felt vulnerable, when not becoming cynical felt foolish. But you trusted your values more than your fear. You understood that becoming hard would protect you temporarily, but cost you in the long term. You chose to remain human. This choice preserved your capacity for joy, connection, and meaning. Your boundaries became clearer. You learned that kindness without boundaries leads to exhaustion. Strength without compassion leads to isolation. You learned to integrate both. You could be firm and gentle, clear and respectful, direct and calm. This integration is rare because it requires self-awareness and emotional regulation. You developed both. Through hardship, your ego lost its grip. You stopped needing to be right. You stopped needing to win. You stopped needing to be seen as strong. Ironically, this is when your true strength emerged. When you no longer needed to display it, it became embodied. You carried yourself differently. You listened more. You spoke with intention. You moved with purpose. You learned that resilience is not about never feeling pain. It is about not allowing pain to dictate your identity. You felt deeply, but you did not drown. You acknowledged wounds, but you did not live inside them. You healed without erasing memory. This allowed you to grow without denial. Now, when challenges arise, you meet them with calm instead of panic. You respond instead of react. You remain grounded instead of defensive. This does not mean you are unaffected. It means you are centered. Centered people are difficult to manipulate. They are not driven by fear or ego. They are driven by clarity. You have become strong in a way that is sustainable. Hardness eventually cracks. Suppressed emotion leaks out. Defensive postures exhaust the system. But integrated strength endures. It adapts. It flows. You have learned how to bend without breaking. This is the highest form of strength. So when it is said that you became strong without becoming hard, understand the depth of this statement. You protected your essence while refining your edges. You preserved your heart while strengthening your spine. You did not let pain turn you into someone you would not respect. This is not accidental. This is earned. And because of this, you are prepared to carry responsibility, influence, and expansion without losing yourself.